Welcome to Garage Gym Athlete Ask Me Anything. It's pretty simple. I'll be answering questions from the thousands of athletes that follow our daily programming. If you have a question or topic you want submitted, go to garagegymathlete.com/AMA. Let's get started. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast. Jared Moon here with Joe Courtney. What's up, Joe?
Hey, man.
AMA, let's do it. Asher asked a question. He said, thoughts on programming progressions for certain lifts to help train proper movement for lifts like cleans. Would this be something that novices and seasoned lifters alike would benefit from? What are your thoughts on lifting progressions, Joe?
Usually when I help people with their forms, because when we do video submissions on either if you need form check or in the past just working with athletes and such, it usually is breaking it down to the very beginning. So the first two parts of a lift is where a lot of people fail. And honestly, if you want to get better at something, then you should start from the beginning anyway. So from the setup to the very first pull, I've noticed a lot with athletes that say even just a deadlift, a snatch, a clean, the first pull lifting it off the ground, there's things to fix. So there's plenty of tutorials and things online on YouTube videos, but break it down the movements into segments. And instead of like watching a video of like, oh, okay, when this person does this full clean, I see them doing this with their feet. So I'm going to go and clean right now and try and do that with my feet, trying to put everything together while it's in motion. Whereas you should just do the first segment and perfect the first segment first, and then string that to the second segment, and then string those two together, and then so on and so forth throughout is kind of how I break things down and teach them. Or when people send me a video that if their form is all screwed up, I still only give them like one or two things to fix first, to work on, to practice, and then just go from there versus throwing everything at them at once.
Yeah. And I think, so if we're talking Olympic lifts specifically, I mean, that's even how the pros train Olympic lifts is they do snatch pulls, clean pulls. They break it down. That's why they have jerk boxes at different heights. So they pull it from above the knee, below the knee, mid thigh. Like they do all these different things to break down the lift even further so you can get more practice and more muscle memory surrounded all the different sections of a lift, because sometimes you can just have one bad portion of a lift. Like you could do something wrong at the bottom of a squat, or you could, like Joe saying, you could have a bad pull off the floor, but everything else might look good. But that one thing can screw up the rest of the lift. And it does with the Olympic lift. The only thing I think is hard is a self-diagnosis if you're not really into this stuff. Of like, I do think that people should, this is true of all garage gym athletes for all lifting. Like, I think that you should film yourself and watch yourself lift, because most of us don't have mirrors in our gyms. And so if you don't have a mirror, then there's no real way to know if what you're doing is right. I think about that all the time, because I do film myself doing squats and whatever occasionally, but I'm always like, I wonder if my squat form has changed. I wonder, like, it feels right to me, but what if something's off? And so I still do frequent video reviews, having probably put in like 1,000,000 squat repetitions, and I still, do reviews and form checks and everything. So I think that you should break these things down as much as possible. It is super annoying if you're new at lifting to like do all these pieces of a lift and then try and put it together. But your body is learning. It's like a golf swing. It's like you're putting all these things together. You keep practicing and practicing, and then as you complete the full movement, whatever that movement may be, you will get better at it. So I think progressions are really good. And what's cool about specifically cleans, as Asher mentioned, if you can do a clean pull, which I'm still comfortable programming clean pulls. Like we gotten away from most Olympic lifts, but things you'll still see for us are clean pulls and even like hang cleans and occasional squat cleans, because there's just a solid movement and it's not that hard to execute. It's when you're going overhead or there's some sort of footwork involved where things get really complicated on these lifts that make it more, that make it worse. So anyway, I do think that progressions are super important, no matter the lift, even if it's just a back squat or a deadlift. I know when I first was learning to deadlift, I watched video after video. I sat in my living room and did, broomstick, PVC stuff. Like, I mean, I probably spent 2 or 3 days perfecting my deadlift with like no weight before I went to go deadlift. And then I started light and moved up. I'm just real meticulous about those things because I don't want to get hurt on some of these bigger lifts. So progressions are really important. And I think everyone should watch themselves and break down their own form and see where they're going wrong.
Yeah, video review is big. It's great. Even recently, I've videoed myself on the squat, and I've noticed sometimes I do like my hips shift one direction or the other to the side, and being conscious of that, I can just think about it when I lift or cleans. I don't do very often, but if I decide to test it or we play around one weekend and do it, I'll sometimes video myself, and then if there's a point where if my hips aren't extending enough, then I notice that in the video, then I'll do just a bodyweight exercise like a jump or something to make sure that the muscle memory of getting my hips extended and exploding forward, so that when I go and clean, I notice a huge difference.
Yeah. And one thing I noticed with my squat, let's say over the last 3 years, it was pretty good. Like I had a good squat. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, my knees started diving in. And this happens to a lot of people, but it just had never really been happening to me in the past. But then there was about a year period where like that just was like my default. Like when things got heavy, my knees would come in, and I think that people really overcomplicate this. It's not the end of the world for that to happen, but you don't want it to happen like every single repetition. And I started to go down the YouTube path, and like I just think people overcomplicate the shit out of this. They're like they're taping bands to their knees as they're doing squats with like kettlebells attached, and like you know I've talked about this stuff with you, Joe. Like sometimes people just take it way overboard, and they're normally people with like a doctorate of something who they really want to dive in. I'm sure all that stuff helped, but you know how I stopped making my knees dive in? When I would squat, I wouldn't let my knees dive in.
Yeah, pushing them out. Yeah.
Yeah, that was it. That was the fix. It wasn't a complicated thing. I did have to lower the weight to be able to get to that point. And that's why, like, when I lift today and people watch me do a squat video, every time, 9 times out of 10, people are like, you could lift more weight. And I'm like, if I lift more weight, my form might break down. This is the maximum load I could lift with perfect form. And so that's why I always keep that standard as what I do for just squatting and any lift in general. I don't let the form break down. The only case I would let that happen is if I go for the 500-pound back squat and 5-minute mile, and my form needs to break down a little bit to get that 500-pound back squat. That's the only case. I'm not even saying a regular PR fit week. Still not okay in a regular PR fit week. Only okay if you're going for a really fast mile and a heavy back squat in the same day. But
Because then you can retire and just be a biker.
yeah, I'm done after this. If I can achieve it, I can just be done.
Selling the rack.
Yeah, I was just gonna go cycle and do Murph. That's it. All right. Asher, I do appreciate the question. If anybody else has a question, go to garagegymathlete.com/AMA, submit your questions, and we'll be happy to answer that. Now, if you're on your little podcast player right now, we'd love a review. I know I just say it at the end of AMAs, but I'm asking you. 5-star review, positive comment, really helps the show. I would really appreciate it. Joe, would you appreciate it?
Always, of course.
Yeah, Joe would love it. Like we would just love it. So go give that review. YouTube, if you like seeing our smiling faces, I don't even know if we smiled this whole podcast, but if we did, you can see that on YouTube. So subscribe, give us a comment, thumbs up, and we would love that as well. So thanks for watching or listening. I hope you enjoyed today's Ask Me Anything episode. So one more time, if you want to submit a question, topic, or idea, you can do so at garagegymathlete.com/AMA. And hey, while you're there, if you haven't already, sign up for Garage Gym Athlete membership. We are the best community and programming on the internet. I dare you to try and prove me wrong.